All right, good morning, everyone. Welcome to the July 12th Transit Technical Advisory Committee. Let's go ahead and get started with introductions. I will call out each agency and we'll start in the room, and then actually let's do it twice. I'll call out each agency and those in the room can answer it, and then we'll move to the screen. So let's go ahead and start with Golden Gate Transit.
David Davenport.
And Marin Transit.
Kathleen Sullivan.
San Rosa City Bus.
Rachel E.
We'll go to the screen and do everyone on there afterward. And Smart.
Emily Betts.
All right, and then SCTA, RCPA, I'm Dana Trey.
Catherine Steps. Chris Barney.
And Shauna Gauze.
All right, and then let's go ahead and move to the screen. And let's start with all right, Smart staff online.
Owen Christopherson.
See Joanne there as well. And then Golden Gate Transit staff online.
Hi, Jacob Brown, Golden Gate.
And Petaluma Transit.
Hey, Atkinson.
Right, and then Caltrans.
Hi, it's Orlando with Caltrans. Orlando Ramirez with Caltrans.
Right, and let's do SCTA staff on the screen.
Hi, Suzanne Smith, SCTA.
Gabriel Rupert, SCTA.
Ross Glendennen, SCTA.
Adam Garcia, SCTA, RCPA.
Thank you. And we have Jared Hall from Petaluma Transit coming in right now. And then let's go to members of the public. Steve, you want to say hello?
Good morning, you're Steve Bertlebow.
Morning. All right. And then I see Zoe Unruh from Smart has joined as well. Anyone else that I missed? Okay, let's go ahead and get started. Does anyone have is there any public comment on items not on the agenda? All right, then let's go ahead and move on to the meeting notes from the June 14th meeting. Does anybody have any comments or corrections on the notes? Get a motion on that? Move to approve.
Second.
Great. Thank you. All right, so let's move on to regional funding. We wanted to bring to your attention MTC's call for interest for the Community Action Resource and Empowerment Program, which is kind of a continuation of the former Lifeline Transportation Program, rebranded and with some kind of changes to it. Right now, they are just accepting letters of interest through the 21st, so it's a pretty short turnaround time. And with those letters of interest, they will then be developing the program a little bit more and identifying what types of projects they'll be looking at and working with the agencies that have been interested. So projects that are in adopted community-based transportation plans are eligible for both kind of project development, further project development and implementation funding. I have, our adopted community-based transportation plans are fairly old. But we did an inventory of kind of what the status of all of the projects were with our CTP back in 2021. So I've attached a list of all those projects and the statuses of them, just for your information and to take a look through and see if there's projects that are in there that have not been implemented and still seem relevant and like they would be ready for funding. We are kind of on to tear off that note, we are getting ready to develop 2 new community-based transportation plans. One in Santa Rosa along the Santa Rosa Avenue corridor in South Santa Rosa, and then one in Rohnert Park, Central Rohnert Park. Those will likely kick off late this fall or early next year. But so for this round of the CARE program, it would really just be those previously adopted community-based transportation plans.
Which part of Santa Rosa? Like
South
Westlake?
Santa Rosa, along Santa Rosa Avenue corridor.
Not that way, okay.
So southeast Santa Rosa.
What's the funding source now for those?
Um,
It's been so long since I've done one of
MTC
those.
has a carve out.
Is it a new program or the same program with all of it?
it's different funding.
Yeah.
So the funding under Lifeline previously, there were a number of sources, and then some of those ended, and it became like 1 or 2 sources. So it was really only transit projects that were eligible. And I believe this is actually some OBAG 3 funds that's set aside.
Interesting.
So there's it opens it up to different types of projects. And yeah, MTC is hosting 2 informational meetings, one this afternoon at 1 o'clock and then one on July 19th. So if you're thinking about projects, I encourage you to attend those, and yeah, let us know.
Do you know what time on July 19th?
1 o'clock as well. Yeah.
So one question I had in reviewing sort of the scope that they put forward for this round, there seems to be a real emphasis on participatory budgeting for anything that's implementation related. And so my question is, that's not something that transit agencies tend to do, which is not to say we couldn't, but at least for city bus, we're part of the city and we wouldn't likely do our own participatory budgeting exercise. It would have to be more of a citywide exercise. So, and I noticed later they say, or similar. And I guess that's a question for the webinars, but I think there's a lot of good ways to engage the public. Participatory budgeting is very specific and it's great, but they might need to consider other ways that we can demonstrate a robust, sort of public participation in project development, because I don't see that a lot of transit agencies may have the capacity to run a true participatory budgeting process, at least the smaller ones. I don't know, it's just some feedback.
Yeah, and it sounds like you can get funding to do that participatory budgeting process, but it's hard to tell if how how many different concepts do you put out there to work with and that would fit within the funding available. So yeah, definitely a good question for the webinar. Steve.
Yes, a problem with connections between the bus services and SMART has been raised sort of incidentally by SMART's new general manager. If you have a bus that arrives before the train comes into the station, people can get off the bus and get onto the train. But nobody riding that bus wants to sit for 10 minutes while the train arrives, the passengers get off, and passengers get back onto the bus. I think the best way to cure that is probably to move the transit centers or the transit malls from where they are now to the SMART stations, because layovers at the stations, if it's the beginning or end of a route, make more sense. At least that was our experience in Sacramento. That's a very long range kind of project, but I think it's one that we need to start. as soon as we can. This might be an opportunity to get it going.
And do you mind if I just make a quick response? Yeah, and Steve, so in terms of Santa Rosa, you know, we of course recognize the challenge of that gap between the transit mall location and the smart station. And we actually have some funding awarded in the TIRSIP grant that SCTA won to study, you know, options we might have in the future to better connect those two facilities. And so that's not something we've gotten going with yet, but that is something we have some funding set aside to work with SMART as well as our other partners in the downtown area to look at what future opportunities could be.
Well, that's good to hear. My thinking is that Petaluma put its transfer points a good half-mile walk from the station. Maybe not quite half, but longer than most people want to walk. I would hope that Petaluma will start thinking about moving that over so that it's right in the back door of the station.
Yeah, thanks, Steve. This is Jared. Kind of similar with the TIRSIP grant that Rachel mentioned. We have a lot of funding that we received for improvements to the new Corona station that'll be going in starting this summer, I believe, construction. And that'll be the second Petaluma station. So a lot of money identified for improvements there, additional bus stops, etc. Regarding the existing station closer to downtown, eventually I know there's plans for development of that area and improved connectivity through it for pedestrians through the middle of that. Right now we're talking about how we can improve stops along that area. That would be good transfer points between SMART and Petaluma Transit. And we're looking at adding service on routes 2 and 11 and possibly starting a new connector service over the upcoming year as well. All of those would provide additional connectivity to and from SMART as well. I don't know if anyone from SMART has other thoughts on any of that.
Yes, everything Jared said about Petaluma. You know, the transit mall is certainly a lot closer to the train station than it is in some other towns. So it's a great opportunity. When that parcel is developed, I think that there will be, the pedestrian improvements will make it feel a lot closer. You know, Steve, the question of whether the bus is able to meet the train, you know, ultimately, really, you're looking at two different types of bus services, right? Buses that are oriented to be timed to the train, are willing to hold for the train and really serve the train, and then buses that have other jobs. And so, given the fact that SMART is so young, right? We just haven't grown into, as a transit community, having that type of bus service in the North Bay yet. But I mean, that's something that we're working on. So you raised a good point.
And one other thought with that, Steve, it's hard when you have a time-based route to ever hit connectivity well. For Petaluma, for example, I think our loads are pretty evenly split on SMART, northbound or southbound in the morning. So it's not like other parts of the corridor to where you know the majority of the people are going one direction in the morning. You know, on the far north end, they're going southbound, obviously. In Petaluma, especially, it's a pretty even split. So it's really hard with the buses if you don't have them running every 10 minutes and they're running every 20 to 30. It's a offset. It's kind of a decision making. Do you want to prioritize people getting to the train before it arrives so they can take the bus and get on the train? Or do you want the bus getting there after the train so they can get off and go to their jobs elsewhere throughout Petaluma? It's hard to do that anytime the bus isn't running often enough. If it's running every 30 minutes, that's always a difficult kind of decision to make. It's a lot easier if the bus is running more often, like every 10 minutes, because then either way you have good connection options. You're not waiting too much longer. But that's kind of the service and the resources we've had thus far. It's trying to improve those services over time and adding in new kind of models, to kind of Emily's point.
Well, I'm happy to hear that everybody has this somewhere on their list.
Thanks. All right, let's go ahead and move on to transit integration updates. I'll give a brief update on the Sonoma County Transit bus integration work. We are expecting a draft, admin draft, existing conditions memo. Today it hasn't come in yet, but we are expecting that, and we'll make sure that all the transit operators that have contributed their data to it have a chance to review that. We have the review periods through the 27th of this month and can be reviewed in SharePoint, our consultant's SharePoint document. Let's see. Otherwise, we are getting ready to kick off the website design and development project with Trillium next Wednesday. So looking forward to that. And that's all I have. Anything else? No, okay. And I guess we have, and the next item, the MTC Transit 2050 plus. So I think any other regional efforts we could discuss under that. Anything else on the local effort? All right, then let's go ahead and move on to item number 6, which is, we've kept this as a standing item. I'm not aware of all the schedules in meeting with MTC, but for those of you that are on the advisory committee for MTC Transit 2050 plus, we would love to hear any updates and discussion from the group.
Let's see, since the last time we met, we've brought the consultant on board, Darren Pierce, and so they will be working on the project with MTC and the project management team. The project management team is looking at hubs in the system currently, and I believe Kathleen sent an email to everyone recently about that. So we've had some, and we've had some informal discussion about it in addition to the email Kathleen sent. And so I think the group is leaning towards not differentiating between kind of timed hubs and other key locations, because really how it's been presented so far, you wouldn't really try to design timed connections in an environment where most of the buses are coming every 7 or 8 minutes, because it's not really necessary. So like in the core of San Francisco and Oakland, for example, all those were originally identified as timed locations, but you don't time service when it's that frequent. So I think we will flatten out that differentiation, and there's some discussion about whether the hubs in the North Bay make the most sense in Marin and Sonoma. Specifically, I think we've already agreed that Larkspur and San Rafael will be divided, and then there's some discussion about whether Novato is more appropriate than Petaluma, for example, because Petaluma currently isn't identified as a hub. The other location in Sonoma County is Santa Rosa, which we've all agreed is, a major hub. So there's some discussion there. There's a couple questions in the South Bay and East Bay as well about where hubs are, as well as the addition of a hub at Daly City, which is currently missing from the whole concept. But we're trying not to add every transit center in the system, because that becomes too overwhelming from a modeling standpoint. I think MTC wants 30 to 40 is what they said. Yeah. So we're probably around 30 right now, I would estimate. So. And then I don't know.
I would just add 2 more things on the hubs. Is one potential idea, if we take away the time versus other, is doing like a concentrated versus dispersed. So San Rafael Transit Center, for example, is a very concentrated hub. It's one location that has Smart and Golden Gate, and this is just an idea in concept right now, but there seemed to be some agreement in the initial conversation. Versus more dispersed, there's examples like Santa Rosa where there's sort of a long walk between the 2 centers, and there's examples that MTC is working with where it's even more dispersed, where there's really like separate stations that locally feel like separate hubs but are close enough together that from the MTC standpoint, the sort of high level regional standpoint, they don't want to, like downtown San Francisco, ironically, even though there's just so many close together. So from MTC's standpoint, they want to sort of lump like all of downtown, but Barton Muni would prefer to have Embarcadero. And anyway, so there we might go with that sort of dispersed versus concentrated idea. But that's still under discussion. And then the only other thing I'd say that's sort of a tension for the project as a whole, but for this particular task is local ridership versus regional connections. Like the South Bay, they have some stops which are really high ridership locations where there's a huge amount of transit activity, but maybe not as much regional, transit activity. And so they currently, it tends towards preference given to more regional connectivity because it's a regional exercise. But for the South Bay operators, it feels really weird to have lower ridership stops given precedence over much higher ridership stops. And that's really a tension that's, I'd say, throughout the whole effort, because this is MTC led and it's really regional connection focused. A huge amount of our ridership is just local. And so trying to strike that balance, I think we are in constant conversations about between MTC and operators. I will say, I think it's good that we have this intensive operator participation. I mean, I think there's still questions about how much the RTP is going to be really distinct from how the old RTPs were. But if nothing else, they've never had like a transit specific TAC effectively that's giving really specific input just to the transit component of the RTP. So I think that's a positive, even if it's not, all the outcomes we would hope to have out of this exercise, it's at least a step in the right direction. So yeah.
We had a couple comments. I've actually opened your email twice to respond, and then someone walks in my office.
Exactly.
Let's see. So yeah, I agree with Petaluma. Well, the Amtrak connection is a Petaluma now, so I don't know how that weighs into their regional significance, but
buses.
It's a transfer point for the three-way bus.
Yeah, and I think that was one of the discussion items that I just commented on maybe yesterday is the California intercity bus study identifies that connection is shifting to be Nevada to Suisun City, but right now it's Petaluma to Martinez. So what are we trying to capture? Does that change theoretically would happen by 2050?
Sort of current versus future. Yeah, and then to the SIB study and like a lot of other Caltrans work, Cloverdale is it's the terminus of planned terminus of SMART, and then it's where all the buses will be connecting in from the north. So we're party to all these conversations, long-term planning in the far north, and that's what they're planning on. That's the regional hub. So from a regional perspective, that should play into the hubs.
That's a good point. That's missing, but they do have Gilroy in the south, which functions similarly.
Right. Yeah.
Right. And a little more to the east. So,
right. That's a good point.
Yeah, I would like to have Petaluma added on there. It's the one part of the city that is all transit services connecting through there, including Amtrak,
And the SCT route 40 comes over from Sonoma to Petaluma. That's the connection there. So
yeah, Golden Gate, SMART, everyone runs through that. So that would make sense to me to add that.
I know I shouldn't advocate for one fewer Marin County hub, but it does seem, when you think of just like a regional destination, I feel like the Petaluma is more so than Nevada. But
does it have to be Petaluma versus Nevada?
I mean, we can try and get more, but in the 30 to 40, we should definitely start by asking for adding one. And then if they really push, we might have to make the decision.
Right.
So
yeah, and I think that'll be part of the discussion of if we're trying to capture what's happening now and maybe in 2050 it was different.
Yeah.
The challenge is, this plan sort of has a midpoint analysis as well. So we might really just need to do both, even though one will not be as important at a certain point.
Yeah, good point.
Yeah, the California State Rail Plan lays out the short and mid long-term timelines for connecting to Cloverdale and connecting to Nevada east-west. So maybe those timeframes could play into this framework. Look at that. But yeah, they're planning on timed rail connections at Nevada.
In the state rail plan? In the intercity bus? One of those.
State rail plan intercity bus would be Cloverdale.
Yeah, I don't know if the bus study talks about the time connection, or if it's just sort of assumed. Then it'll pass already.
Yeah.
It was interesting because the bus plan was like, oh, the Bay Area is sort of just kind of grayed out, but somehow the North Bay still ended up being like specified in quite a bit of detail in the plan. So I was a bit confused by that experience. Abbreviate. Or suddenly, like somewhere south in Nevada, it just sort of disappears in terms of detail.
In which plan?
The intercity bus study.
Oh, the SIBS.
Yeah,
That's called. I love that name.
So charming.
I can actually put this into your spreadsheet and send it to you.
Okay.
Yeah. Today, tomorrow, you need to get it to them by.
Well, we have a PMT tomorrow morning.
Okay.
And so if you could do it today, if a deadline would assist you in.
It would.
Okay. Today would be fantastic.
You said like around a week, and I'm like,
Yeah.
oh, that's vague.
That's
Okay.
vague.
All right,
Yeah,
I'll
we
send it to
need
you
it.
today.
Sharp, 9 sharp.
Yeah, exactly.
Thank you. That's what I need. That's what I need. COB. Okay.
Great, thank you for the update.
They have, I'll actually say one more thing. I put this in the email so that they have formalized sort of there's 4 small operators now represented. So, and it sort of breaks down geographically. So we basically split up all the other small operators by geography to just keep people in the loop. And I think in particular, when there's key kind of decision gates of like, this is what's going into the RTP. And I think this is one of them where I don't know if this will be the final opportunity. Right. They'll probably, when we create the connected network concepts, but you never know when something is like, no, that was it. And so I'm just going to try and keep this group in the loop. And I can, you know, David and I together to, although I'm technically a small operator, but to just make sure you guys are aware, particularly of when there's key milestones. And they're doing that, you know, there's need for each area of the region effectively. So.
No, we appreciate it. That's great.
Yeah.
Thanks.
What are the other 3? Let's see. CTA, County Connection.
County Connection, Tri-Delta.
Tri-Delta and
Fine. One's considered a small operator, right? Yeah. And then is there a 4th one?
I might have to look it up. But I think there are 4 because they split us up.
Right.
Yeah, I'll look it up.
Yeah, Marin.
To make sure I don't miss.
Yeah, it's Marin Transit, Fine, Tri-Delta Transit, and County Connection are the 4 small. Yeah. Although it's interesting, because Marin Transit, County Connection, Golden Gate are all at about the same ridership level post-pandemic. So
yeah. That's why I'm CCing you on the email.
Yeah. We'll be drawing straws for who ends up in one group versus the other.
Right.
Great, well, thank you. Let's go ahead and move on to transit operator updates. Jared, do you want to start us off?
Yeah, sure. So our fixed route ridership in May was up 7.5%, paratransit 19%. So continuing to increase on those. We'll see what impact it has on the summer youth fare free program. Hopefully see an increase on that. Facility electrification continues to move along for us. We're finalizing the specs for a switch gear to start that order process soon. Finalizing the chargers. I think we're pretty close to having those all decided within like a month or so. So that's good news. And then doing the first fixed route electric bus procurement, also getting close to finalizing the specs on those within a couple weeks as well. So kind of close. Our ZEB plan is done, the draft plan. We're hoping to have that to council in this. I know we're a little bit behind on that one. Haven't heard anything on it yet. But thanks everyone for their help. You know, we looked at several plans, including the Santa Rosa one and others for kind of inspiration on doing that plan of our own. So I'll send it around to everyone when it's ready to go. I think those are the major ones for now.
Great, thank you.
No problem.
All right, Golden Gate Transit.
Yes, so we had our first fare change in a couple of years take effect on July 1st. It's the 12th, and I haven't heard any complaints so far. So I guess everything rolled out correctly, which is good. We are working on a small service change for the September sign up, which we're holding in September to match with BART. The BART schedule is changing dramatically. And so we have completely reimagined our Route 580, which is our East Bay connection. I've already given Emily a heads up that there will be significant changes to the connection windows in San Rafael for that service. Most of the trips work out, except for just, I think, a couple on weekdays, which are really tight, unfortunately, but not much we can do. Short of reimagining BART a second time. Our plan after September is to then transition to the kind of new regional timeline, which means our next service change package would be January 14th or whatever that Sunday is. Our signups for bus will start on the Sunday, ferry starts on the Monday, so they'll just be a day apart, and that's a function of those collective bargaining and payroll things that are just not worth trying to change to shift to a Saturday. Let's see, beyond that, I do have some updated ridership. It's been so long since I've even talked about them, I can't say it. But actually, I'll talk about bridge traffic first, since that's, as I'm sure you've seen in some news media coverage in the past week in the Chronicle and whatnot. Bridge traffic really dictates how much funding we have for our transit service. Compared to pre-pandemic levels, for the month of May, we're still down 15% overall. But we are up 3.5% compared to this time last year, to May 2022. So there's been some upward progress, because we were really holding steady at that kind of down 18% mark for quite a while. So it's nice that we're up a little bit more beyond that, but still not enough to fully fund our transit service, as we have historically. For our bus ridership for the month of May, compared to May of 2022, it is up 12%, which is good. But we're still down 56% compared to pre-pandemic levels. So that has unfortunately been a pretty similar number for probably a year and a half now at this point. And then ferry ridership in May was up 26% compared to May of 2022, which is great. But it's still down around 43% compared to pre-pandemic levels. And on the ferry side of things, the service all day, every day to Tiburon and the addition of Angel Island, that's helping boost the ridership numbers, since the commute-oriented service out of Sausalito and Larkspur still, the numbers aren't really anywhere close to where they used to be. They have gone up, which is nice, and we did increase peak period service on the Larkspur route, but it's still a 2-boat operation instead of a 3-boat operation like it used to be. And I think that's mostly it.
Any updates on the progress of the strategic plan?
I believe public outreach phase was due June 30th. It's interesting that I think it's really kind of been board led. So at the staff level, we're sort of along for the ride along with the public. But I do know that there was a June 30th deadline for receiving comments from the public, and we received comments from the public and from partner agencies as well during that period.
Okay. Thank you. All right, we're in transit.
Well, our big news is that we got a big grant for our new operations maintenance facility. Now we just need somewhere to put it. So we are sort of increasing our efforts on figuring out where it's going to be located. We're also having a press event next Friday, which you will all be getting an invitation to, with Huffman and potentially Padilla to give a big check. So it'll be at our offices at 11 a.m. And let's see, that's the big news That's all I'm working on. Is now creating a precedent next Friday as of yesterday. Trying to think what else is worth it. I don't know how relevant this is, but we are having MTC come and present on the Richmond Forward effort to our board at their request in August. There's just been questions that have come up about what that effort is. It's you might,
yeah,
are you
I'm
in that?
on the TAC.
Yeah. So Ingrid from MTC is the project manager, I guess. Anyway, she's coming to our board to present in August, if anyone has any interest in learning about that. And yeah, I think that's all that's really notable. Yeah.
All right, thank you. All right, the city bus.
I don't think we have too much new from last month. I just give a quick ridership update because I just got the year-end ridership numbers. So ridership's up about 25% year over year for the year. I mean, you know what I mean. The good news, sort of, it's actually not great news. I mean, we weren't really able to increase service hours in the past year, unfortunately, but we still had a 25% increase in ridership with what we have out, which is great. I mean, that's the bright side. So, you know, again, continue to climb the sandhill on driver recruitment. I think we're actually, I keep saying this, but I think we're actually starting to get some traction, you know, to the point that you can't really make a career in transit without being a perpetual optimist. But we are really actually, I think the retirements have tapered off and we've got a pretty solid team to now build on. So hopefully we'll be able to get some new hours out on the street in the coming year. Youth ridership continues to be super strong. So we, you know, pre-pandemic youth ridership was about 215,000 a year and we're at 356,000. So it's been substantial increase over pre-pandemic youth ridership levels with this free fare program. So that continues to just be a huge part of our recovery. So yeah, that's all I've got.
Great, thanks. Smart.
Right. Ridership is good. I think June was 20% over pre-pandemic June. I don't have the year over year, but it's pretty high. It's at least 50% more than last year. Let's see. We ran special service for the fair last weekend. We ran late night service for 5 days after the Marin County Fair, and had a ton of riders. We had 1,000 people just on the late night trains, and we had over 5,000 total people going to Civic Center, which was huge. So I spent 5 days watching the trains move up and down. Let's see. I'm like, when it's over, like, what do I do? What other things do I do? We hosted a wayfinding workshop for the pathway a couple of weeks ago. I know Dana came to that. It was pretty good, sort of an introduction to what is wayfinding on the pathway. We had decent turnout. We're going to have another one in August. So I'll get you the date for that. You can share it with your bike ped people. We just repriced our monthly pass. We reduced the price to reflect a 3-day work week based on 3 zones. You know, we had done fare reductions a couple of years ago across the board, and the price reduction for the monthly pass at that time was just sort of like in line with other reductions. It wasn't based on any travel behavior. And so this was adjusted. And yeah, it's interesting. We've been doing some sort of Clipper data analysis and things like that to see how often people are riding. And we've had a huge increase in the use of the Fare app, right? We have that Masabi run smart Fare app. And it really seems to me that we have around the same number of unique riders, right? The number of riders, people taking less trips. So I'm trying to reframe that as a way of understanding ridership decrease post-COVID, because I think that's the case with a lot of agencies. We've had a huge increase in recreational rides and youth, right? And other people who are not using Clipper monthly passes and riding 5 days a week. So I'm doing a little deep dive on that.
Will you have fare capping under Clipper too?
I mean, we have fare capping now, but
for the monthly pass.
Oh, I see what you mean. Accumulator.
Yeah, accumulator.
We're not leaning towards that, I don't think. I don't know. I would like to talk about it. I
I think that psychologically, there's something about having a pass that does make you ride transit. We were just talking about this, right? So I'm not sure if we're going to do that or not.
We're gonna have both. I do think it has to be in your business rules. So we are about to get a new set of our business rules. So make sure that, I think once this benchmarks, the capability won't be there if you don't get it in the business rules.
I'm sure it is. Yeah, the business rules are ridiculous.
Yeah,
very
but
yeah.
Anyway, things you already know, but we're gonna be offering both.
Okay.
So that the pass is still an option for people, but then if there's riders who don't realize they should be getting a pass, they can also, anyway, just a thought.
Yeah. We continue to count our pathway riders. We have to count pathway counters. It was over 70,000 people in June. So it's really substantial number of people. And I don't know if you saw the grand jury report that came out about SMART, but it was, they were really pointing out that SMART's ridership goals, original ridership goals, were all around pathway plus train. So we've been trying to look at what is that total number now that we have these pathway counters. Just an interesting way to understand the investment in the system. That's probably all I have. Joanne, did you have anything to add? She's floating and there she is.
I am neck deep in processing Caltrans paperwork because we secured the necessary funds to complete the Windsor extension at the June CTC meeting. So we'll be awarding a whole bunch of contracts here coming up for the big one, the two big ones, Windsor extension remobilization, and then the Petaluma North construction contract will be combined with the construction of the pathway from Pengrove to Pengrove to Petaluma and Roanoke Park to Santa Rosa, because the pathway and the station are all in such close proximity that we're contracting them together. And I think that piece will go out in probably, I don't know exactly, September time period. We're getting allocation votes in August. The other one is that we have bids in on what's going to be a really fun piece of the pathway. I think my favorite piece, if you're into batting cages anyway, from McGinnis to Smith Ranch, from the Marin Civic Center to McGinnis Regional Park. So that the bids came in on that, and they're anticipating an award, I think, at our next board meeting for that. And they're trying to hit a narrow window of construction around in the September time period to start that. So that's going to be a fun section of the path. We did secure additional funds to complete the section of the path, to construct the section of the path from Santa Rosa North to airport as well at the last CTC meeting. So that's good news too. I think that's it.
Great, thank you. Do we miss anyone? I think we covered it.
County on there?
No, I don't think anyone from county yet. I know Steven's out and Brian had a conflict. So, all right, great. Let's move on to other business comments and announcements. I know there's two from the SCTA side. Shauna, you want to go first?
Sure. So, like I do every year for Measure M recipients, we presented a schedule for the Citizens Advisory Committee to receive papers to talk about Measure M, and sent that out to the Technical Advisory Committee. Hopefully everybody here is on that mailing list, so you would have received that. Just wanted to sort of reiterate that all the transit operators are scheduled to present to the Citizens Advisory Committee in September, on September 25th. So if that doesn't work for any of the transit operators, knowing that now would be good. I'd still have one month with an open slot that I could probably move it to if September doesn't work, but it is a year past when you did it last time, so that would be ideal. With that, happy to take any questions.
Great, thanks, Shauna.
Great, thank you.
All right, and then we want to check in with you about Plan Bay Area 2050 Plus. item.
Yeah, thanks, Dana. So just wanted to thank everyone first off for providing information on the transit headway project. So all that's into Adam over at MTC. So we may hear some questions back. So, but thank you for that first push to get all that information together. One other thing I wanted to just raise with the group is I think at our last meeting, Joanne raised the concept of a some sort of first and last mile connection line item for that project. So we're interested in adding that to the project. We've reached out to MTC to see how to do that, but I wanted to check in with the group and see if there are any reservations or thoughts about adding something like that into that project.
Oh, you'd probably be interested.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to get my house.
Yeah, so we're just asking if there are any reservations about adding a first last mile connection project to the transit headway Plan Bay area project. So we do have an example kind of up the airport area right now. So including kind of a system agnostic generalized line item to kind of cover any future type projects would be a good idea.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. I think one thing, just this may be neither here nor there, honestly, but you know, the frequency improvements that we included, a lot of them are smart feeding, right? Because they are increasing frequency along the major corridors that serve the smart stations. So I think just as long as there's an acknowledgement that some of the main project also includes what we would consider not what we typically think of as first mile, last mile, but definitely service feeding the train. So.
Yeah, and we could call this out as micro transit or something like that as well. So Jared, I think you'd included a micro transit line item in there already. So, and we talked to Adam early on, if any, you know, to see if anyone else has done this yet, and no one really has. So, you know, it'll probably need to be something pretty general in there, but just kind of a placeholder.
So is the idea like a demand response type service?
Mm-hmm.
And would this be model for competitiveness, or I mean, Marin County did it and it didn't really work out. So
that's, you know, that's one of the questions we posed to MTC. They don't really know how to model it or, you know, assess the performance on it yet. So
I mean, Tri-Delta, they did a microtransit service designed at connectivity to smart stations.
Okay.
I mean, that one's doing relatively well.
Okay.
They seem to be pretty happy with that project. I think that the scale is a bit different when you're talking about connecting with BARTs. I mean, that's pretty well established, huge amount of ridership, but I think they've shown that's been a successful model for them. They're happy with it.
Okay. Yeah, that could be something to take a look at. And, you know, it may just be a qualitative type assessment, but yeah, so if there aren't any reservations, we'll keep exploring that with MTC and kind of let you know how that proceeds.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, Steve Bernabau.
I wonder if anybody makes a survey of how pedestrians get to bus stops. There's the problem really is that most cities expect the property owner to pay for the bus for these sidewalks. And so there are lots of areas where there just aren't any. So first and last mile for railroads is something we've dealt with for a long time, but who pays attention to how good the sidewalks are between every bus stop and let's say the catchment area that might be a quarter mile around that bus stop? I know that's a big idea, but somebody needs to be looking at it.
Well, you know, we look at it. I think probably all the transit agencies do. I mean, you know, working with the jurisdictions they serve, you know, certainly in Santa Rosa, we have the benefit of being part of the jurisdiction that controls the sidewalks, and there's a coordination on that pedestrian gap fill type project, especially proximate to transit. So, you know, it's slow going, right? Because there's been a lot of development over the years, at least in Santa Rosa, where there have been tons of gaps in the network. And sometimes it takes redevelopment, sometimes it's a city-led project to fill those gaps, but the areas around transit stops are definitely, you know, a focal point of identifying those gaps and how we can fill them. So, for example, there's a project, you know, Montgomery Village is like a prime example where they're missing sidewalks, you know, and that's something that is going to be moving forward from the city side. So, so, you know, again, it's a long-term project, but I know that's something that we do pay attention to, working with our city colleagues.
And I would just add that, you know, that's something that we'll be looking at with the countywide active transportation plan is pedestrian access, and especially around transit hubs. So maybe not at the stop level detail, but definitely around more major activity centers and higher ridership areas.
And MTC has a mobility hub program, and I know that sidewalk connectivity is included as part of sort of that complete streets review. So those are, of course, very specific locations, not just bus stops in general. But every little bit is expensive, and it's usually up to the local jurisdiction, which makes it usually kind of slow going.
Yeah, and for Petaluma, we have an inventory of all our bus stops that looks at the fixtures that are at them, the condition of them. We have a kind of prioritized list of areas that we want to improve over time. And then every time we do surveys, we have questions added in there about how did you get to the service? How did you connect? From what other routes, from what other systems, et cetera. I don't know that there's a comprehensive one that does that across agency, but I think generally transit agencies do similar when they do those kind of surveys.
Right.
Yeah, I just wanted to add to this conversation that in Portland region with TriMet, they have a pedestrian access plan they created a year or two ago that I worked on when I was in Portland area. And so that may be, as the county is doing a county-wide pedestrian access transit plan, that TriMet in the Portland region has a good plan already created that we can use as example.
Thank you. All right, any other business comments or announcements? All right, thank you all.
Do you have any ridership with the Smart Connect yet? No.
I do have ridership. I don't have numbers for you.
Okay. Are people